All right. Today is Monday, the 21st of October, and this is a recap of the macro event that we have so far. This is going to be a really interesting conversation, so grab some popcorn and perhaps some adult beverage because, folks, I got a good one for you tonight. We're going to begin right off the gate here with the monetary policy because what's going on in the economy in terms of hope. What's been keeping this economy from falling into a recession, at least officially? We know that the recession is already underway. If we look at the poorer consumer, more on that as we proceed with the coverage. But the reason why the economy is not officially in a recession, you're not seeing the pain yet because of two elements that we have, what we call the wall of hope. The prospects of rate cuts, that the Fed will cut rates, ease the policy, and create a soft landing where inflation goes down without a recession. And the other hope is the AI mania, which is elevating stocks prices because it is concentrated in the heaviest weight, the Apples, the Nvidias, the Googles, the Microsofts of the world, the biggest companies in the world. And those have the heaviest weight in the indices that you are invested in your pension, in your retirement, in your 401ks. So when these stocks go higher, it doesn't matter what the rest of the market is going to do. The indices go higher, and folks look at their retirement accounts and their investment accounts and feel what we call the wealth impact, quote unquote. And the wealth impact causes the consumer to go ahead and spend because there is a reserve, there is an insurance policy. I can use the credit card because the worst case scenario, I have to sell some stocks and that's going to cover for it. Of course, this is a misleading assumption, which will backfire tremendously in this economy. But for now, the wealth impact is keeping the economy intact from falling altogether into a recession. So let's dissect these items in the wall of hope one by one and look at the updates that we got based on the macroeconomics data that we've gotten so far. If we begin with the prospects of rate cuts, which is keeping that soft landing hope alive, at least for now. There is one problem though. When the Fed decided to cut rates by 50 basis points in September, didn't we expect that mortgage rates will go down? Didn't we expect that credit card rates will go down? Didn't we expect that the borrowing rate in the economy will go down? Well, none of that really happened. Rates actually went higher, and now everybody's baffled. Gee, what happened? And if you have a little bit of experience in following the Fed and the f-ups that they've done throughout the years, you know that this is not new, and this was expected. Keyword, expected. The reason why we see bond yields actually going higher, even though the Fed just cut rates by 50 basis points, is number one, the Federal Reserve doesn't have control over the long end of the yield curve, the 10 to the 30, which really what matters in the economy. Mortgage rates, credit card rates, everything you really care about. He took rates down in the notes, the short-dated treasuries. And by the way, he screwed us because we used to invest at least, myself and a lot of you watching this program, when the Fed raised rates, we bought a lot of notes and a lot of 1 to 2 year treasuries because you can lock in 4.5% rate easily. He lowered the rates on those and made that risk-free avenue of investing less attractive. At the same time, we didn't gain anything on the long end of the yield curve, which is what really matters for the economy. It's a lose-lose situation. Thank you to the idiocy of the Federal Reserve once again. What is the message, though, from the bond market? When the Fed cuts rates by 50 basis points and then we see yields going higher, the bond market is saying, number one, Mr. Fed Chairman Powell, you made a mistake. By cutting with 50 basis points right off the gate, you've overdone it. There was no reason at all for you to cut rates by 50 basis points besides the politics. You wanted to play politics, and now it backfired right in your face. Message number two from the bond market is, Mr. Fed Chairman Powell, by cutting rates with 50 basis points right off the gate, you've now reintroduced the inflation risk back in the economy. And you're going to regret it. And your next move is probably going to be a pause. And if inflation stops going down, as we will see in the data in a minute, it begins to move its way higher again. In time, we're going to begin to talk about rate hikes again. We're not at that point, but this is how dangerous this situation is. Imagine what a rate hike would do in this economy right now, the wreckage, because it will send a panic signal all over the place. The Fed is not going to do it, will be really tolerant not to do it unless they're forced to do it by inflation coming back in a big way. And that's a real possibility, as you will see in a minute. But it's no surprise, after the message from the bond market, that the Fed zombies are backtracking immediately. You have Zombie from Minneapolis, Kashkari, who now says, oh, I see modest rate cuts ahead for the U.S. economy. Wait a minute, you were saying 50 basis points, and we're going to cut. We see rates going down tremendously because inflation is dead. Oh, now we're going to do modest. Gotcha. You're not in control. You have absolutely no clue what you're doing right now. And then you have Zombie Bostic from Atlanta, insider trader Bostic, and he said that his dot was for another 25 basis points rate cut in 24. He did the 50, voted for the 50, and he wanted another 25. Comes the message from the bond market. All of a sudden he says, oh, I'm keeping the door open, skipping a rate cut in November. They're panicking, folks. They're shitting their pants right now because they have no clue what they're doing. They overreact to the data, the fake data, as you'll see in a minute, and they play politics all the time. But this time around, any mistake could be lethal. You got another zombie from Philadelphia, Waller. He said in September that it is time to lower rates, and he's opened to larger cuts. Cut, baby, cut. Just keep cutting. Comes the message from the bond market. Look at his face. Not so happy anymore. He says that he calls for more caution on interest rate cuts after, quote, disappointing, end quote, data. Oh, gotcha. What is this disappointing data that Zombie Waller is talking about? Here it is. We got the news that inflation rate at 2.4% in September, topping expectations. And they say jobless claims highest since August 2023. Notice the stagflation phenomenon, the duality of the risk. Inflation topping expectations. Jobless claims highest since August 2023. Folks, do I need to lay it out for you here? This is the beginning of the end of this economy. Once you have stagflation in full impact, which we're not seeing right now, we're seeing maybe 30% of the stagflation phenomenon. As we progress, we'll see 50% and 100%. At that point, the Federal Reserve will be handicapped. You'll be watching recession rolling all over the economy, but you can't really cut rates or do any stimulus because you have sticky inflation. And that's when you know the game is over. In any case, when we look at the inflation data that we got recently, the overall rate of inflation is heading down 2.4% year on year, but that's mostly because energy prices have been going down. Thank you to a lot of factors such as weakness in China and a lot of manipulation by the government. But if you look at what's really important, the core inflation rate, it came out at 3.3%, better than expected, and you can see from the chart right here, it's curling its way higher. The Fed says the inflation target is 2%. Well, that's 3.3%, and it looks like it's about to move higher again. Now, imagine what's going to happen if geopolitical flare-ups combined with China stimulus lead to the rise in energy prices again. Then both core and the overall rate of inflation will move significantly higher. And that's going to be a major mistake. And maybe at that point, a Federal Reserve pause, not going to slow it down. They have to take one cut away. And again, if they do it, panic all over the markets, all over the economy. What really baffles me, Jay Powell and all of these Fed zombies were alive back in 07 when Bernanke made a mistake. And I would argue that Bernanke had no other choice at that time because we actually had stronger recession data than we have right now, way stronger, in 2007, when Bernanke decided to cut rates by 50 basis points right off the gate in September 2007. Once again, inflation rate was 2.1. All what you got to do is look at a chart of crude oil in 2008 and the huge surge that we've seen in inflation rate, which forced the Fed to pause and not do interest rate cuts anymore. And then we got Lehman, and we're heading the same way here. Then they got forced to cut because there was no other choice. The economy was collapsing after Lehman. But again, what baffles me is if the Federal Reserve did a 50 basis points rate cut in September 07 when the inflation rate was 2.1 and it led to all of that inflation that came after, are you telling me that the Federal Reserve zombies that we have right now are not aware of that? They didn't consider that as a risk when they cut rates by 50 basis points just last September. In the meantime, the inflation rate was 3.3%, the core inflation rate, meaning the risk for flaring up inflation right now is way higher than 07. That's the message that the bond market is sending right now when you see bond yields going higher, even though the Fed cut by 50. And by the way, the dollar also going higher. They're saying that the Fed will be forced to pause, if not hike rates again. They made a major mistake. Once again, you look at the flexible CPI, 2.1. Thank you to the reduction in energy prices. At least for now, we know energy can come back really fast. Case in point, 2008. But then you look at the sticky CPI. That's at 4%. And you're cutting rates by 50 basis points when you have sticky CPI at 4%? What's the matter with you? Are you people insane at the Federal Reserve? Or are you people just playing politics before the elections? Anyways, when we look at this report, the CPI for September, notice that medical care commodities was the only category besides energy that was actually down month on month. The other categories, medical care services, transportation, shelter, apparel, used cars, new cars, electricity, food, everything went higher. Again, not year on year, but month on month, which tells you that the inflation risk is real. And if you reintroduce a little bit of energy inflation, where we see energy prices, gasoline going higher, 0.3%, half a percentage point, you will see that overall inflation rate in the CPI moving significantly higher. And that could be the panic moment for the market. Keep that in mind. You look at the trend for other CPI categories besides energy, you see that most of them recently are actually trending back up. How could you cut rates by 50 basis points when you see these trends? When you got food, new vehicles, used vehicles, apparel, transportation, all actually trending higher. Big mistake. We will see more of that, unfortunately. For us consumers, we will see more pain to come. Not to mention, of course, the fact that insurance rates, whether we're talking about property insurance, car insurance, these rates are not coming down. They're never going to come down. Once they charge you, you think that Geico or Progressive or whatever auto insurance you got, they're going to call you and say, you know what, sir, ma'am, we're going to reduce your insurance rates because we really care about you. And oh, by the way, the Federal Reserve says that inflation is dead. So we're going to reduce your rate. Never going to happen. They only reduce their rates when they're desperate, when there is a recession and consumers cannot have the policy anymore. And in the case of healthcare premiums, they're moving higher as inflation eases, the journal puts it. But here's the problem. You see overall inflation trending down, your earnings, the workers' earnings trending down, but the family premiums for healthcare insurance plans actually moving up. Insurance companies claim that the risks are way too high, be it casualty insurance, be it property insurance, be it healthcare insurance, and they have to hike their rates. That's not going to stop without a recession. What is the Fed going to do about that by cutting rates with 50 basis points? Nothing. You just wasted 50 basis points for nothing. We're going to desperately need rate cuts later on, and they're just wasting ammo right now. But again, folks, when we talk about the duality of the risk, that everybody says, oh, soft landing, but you have the inflation wind, the inflation risk that could knock you off. We just talked about that. We haven't eliminated the inflation risk. And the trends are not looking pretty good. In time, inflation comes back, we're going to have a major problem. What about the recession risk, though? The other wind that could knock us off. Is that diminishing at all? Is that going away because the Fed cut rates by 50 basis points? Not really. You look at the Empire Fed Manufacturing Survey. It crashed from 30-month high to 5-month low. How did that happen? Did the factory blew up all of a sudden? What happened here? Or are we just playing with the data, but the reality is manufacturing is collapsing in this economy? We look at consumer confidence. Here's the headline. U.S. consumer confidence declines unexpectedly as election nears. The survey showed continuing frustration with high prices. So higher prices for longer, higher rates for longer, lots of debt being accumulated. The consumer is falling apart. The consumer is losing confidence in this economy. And here's why. The New York Fed, September credit card delinquency expectations rise to the highest level since April 2020. Uh-oh. Here we go. Kevin Gordon says another news cycle high for the percentage of consumers who expect not being able to make minimum debt payment over the next 3 months per New York Fed. You can see that we're now trending back toward the recession in the 20-teens. High inflation, stagnant wages, higher rates, higher credit card debt accumulated. People took on mortgages they cannot really afford without their fake jobs. The crypto companies and the AI bullshit and the technology companies. We know that these companies can get rid of you just as fast. And then what's going to happen with the mortgage rate that you took on? The auto loans disaster in this economy. Folks took all of these loans and they're paying insane rates on them. What happens when you lose your income? What happens when you've accumulated a lot of other debt in your credit card, for example? And now you're really torn. Do I pay my auto payment? Do I pay my credit card payment? I can't do both. And we wonder why consumer confidence is dropping. When you look at credit delinquency rates, all of these rates are moving higher. Consumers see higher probability of missing near-term credit card payments. It doesn't matter what kind of income you're looking at. Incomes under 50K for sure. Incomes 50K to 100K for sure. Incomes over 100K. Also, the expectations for delinquencies moving higher. This economy, ladies and gentlemen, is increasingly becoming an economy for the ultra-wealthy. Even 100 grand is not, you're poor in California with 100 grand. 300 grand. You're not going to make it in this economy. This economy only works for the owner class who are owning a significant amount of stocks and real estate. And they're having a good time right now with the inflation that we see in the asset prices of these kind of holdings. But for the working class, not so hot so. And I know what you're going to say, but Maverick, what about the employment data? The unemployment rate is going down. We're creating jobs like never before. At least that's what CNBC tells me. Well, here's some jobs for you. Boeing to cut 17,000 jobs as losses deepen during the factory strike. Somehow this kind of job losses doesn't show up in the data though. Why? Because the government is cooking the data more than ever before. Every administration, ladies and gentlemen, cooks the data to a certain magnitude, but none like this administration. The audacity that we've seen with this administration is something that is unprecedented. It's disgusting how they manipulate the data. Listen to this. If you think that the jobs market is okay and we're creating jobs, the reality is we're actually losing jobs. But the reality is being masked by the government. Here's the headline for you. The U.S. risks being caught off guard by a recession with the labor market far weaker than most realize, strategist says. You might say he's doom and gloom and all that crap that you people have been saying. Go back to 1929, the British economist who warned about the crash back a year ago in 28 and again in the spring of 29. Everybody said, oh, come on, look, he's been warning for a while and the market just keeps going higher. And then, what was it, 6 to 7 days? By the way, the anniversary of the 1929 crash. In 6 to 7 days, the biggest crash in history. So be careful here. Things could unwind really, really fast. Let's hear what this doom and gloomer is saying. In his latest monthly commentary, the B. Riley Wealth Chief Investment Strategist cited that September's jobless rate would have been 4.5%. Listen to this. If temporary government positions were eliminated, bingo, bingo. You're never going to hear that kind of information on CNBC. You'll see Steve Leisman and all these propagandists just smiling ear to ear. Oh, the economy is doing better than ever. Kamala. Okay, that's significantly higher than the 4.1% rate published 2 weeks ago, a figure that convinced Wall Street that the labor market was doing better than originally feared. Dietrich, this is the analyst, pointed out that this year's significant jump in state and local government employment adding to the jobs market's perception of strength. In his view, the rise of these positions came after $500 billion worth of COVID-era stimulus programs were finally delivered to regional governments this year, which rushed to use these funds on new positions before the September 30th fiscal year end deadline, all before the elections. Unfortunately, almost all of these jobs were listed as temporary jobs, and unless these governments are willing to use their own state and local taxes to keep them, listen to this, their own state and local taxes to keep them, hired after September 30, most of these jobs will be lost over the next few months. Once we finish with the elections, the reality of this economy will be exposed. I know what you're going to say. Okay, jobs, the government's playing with the data, Maverick. What about retail sales? Retail sales came out better than expectations. The consumer is better than ever before. The bankster from Bank of America, Monahan, he says that the consumer is robust and resilient. Retail sales rose 0.4% in September, better than expected, and jobless claims dipped. Good news, right? Excluding autos, sales accelerated 0.5 percentage point better than the forecast of just 0.1% rise. Listen to this. These numbers are adjusted for seasonal factors, but not inflation, which rose 0.2% in the month as measured by the Consumer Price Index. Oh, how convenient. This is why retail sales data is one of the most bullshit data in economic history. They measure the dollar amount spent by the consumer. Of course, we're spending more because we're paying more because of inflation. It ain't because we're spending more because we got more money to spend. And on top of that, if they adjust retail sales to inflation, as they do to the seasonal cooking that they're doing, retail sales will be down tremendously. And this rating that we've got, you're never going to hear this I didn't hear a beep about it in CNBC or any of the Wall Street Journal, all of them. None of them brought up this point right here that I'm going to show you right now. That absent of the seasonal adjustment, retail sales were down tremendously. It's disgusting how they play with the data. You look at these categories. I did the job for you. Retail and food services. You look at the raw reading, non-adjusted, down. Motor vehicle, down. Furniture, down 5.25%. Appliances, down 6.6%. You see, a lot of these categories are much better after the seasonal adjustments. Absent of the seasonal adjustments, retail sales would have been down. And it makes sense that retail sales is actually down. The consumer is way weaker than we're being told. Look at the delinquency rates and the fears of higher delinquencies that we just covered. How can the two be aligned? The retail sales are going higher. The consumer is robust. But at the same time, the consumer is saying, I'm telling you right here that I'm worried about being delinquent, that things are not looking good right now. Which one do you want to believe? And this economy, ladies and gentlemen, once again, is the economy of the haves. And the haves, not like the old school days where you made over 100 grand or 200 grand, you were considered rich. Not anymore. We're talking about the millionaires and beyond. Even 1 million doesn't matter anymore. You need to do more. Retail spending in the economy, look at this. Growth in retail spending. In the lower income categories, 0 to 60Ks a year, they're actually trending down. In middle income, 60 to 100, the highs are already in behind us. We're just using more and more credit cards, which will end up being a disaster, and nobody's talking about this right now. What happens when all of this debt is accumulated, and then the consumer loses his or her job? What happens to all of that debt that incurred? Who's going to pay the insane rent? Well, we see retail spending even with high-income consumers, 100K. Sure, moving higher, it's been leading the economy higher, thank you to the wealth effect from the stock market. But we've also taught, and it seems that we're not going to hit the highs again. We're going to head down from this point on. Because once again, you look at the credit delinquency worries. Even folks who are making over 100K, the worries are moving higher, that they could get delinquent. It's a credit card kind of economy right now. Everybody's just surviving on the credit card spending. And the link between us and the recession is that job that you got that gives you the income to pay the credit card, at least a portion of it. But stock market goes down, sentiment sours in the economy, you're going to lose your job, and disaster will be all over the place. This is why folks say, well, the economy and the stock market are divorced and whatnot. But the economy is only holding because of the bubble in the stock market. But even the stock market reflects this economy of the haves and have-nots. You look at the stock like Dollar General, for example, catering to the lower income consumer. This stock crashed. It's in a disaster zone right now. On the other hand, the stock of Ferrari, catering to the ultra-wealthy consumer, all-time highs, and it can't stop. Sales for the high-end luxury cars are skyrocketing. There is a wait list. And then somehow you look at the ads. I live in Nevada, a battleground state, so we were just drowned with these stupid ads. And you hear Kamala talking about, oh, I want to build an economy for the middle class. Well, you've been here in the vice presidency, and this is the economy that we got. And oh, by the way, they've been trying to keep this facade going by pouring more and more and more cash into the economy. It ain't just the cooking of the data. It's throwing cash, more and more debt, more and more deficit to keep this zombie economy alive. The effect is we have U.S. deficit topping $1.8 trillion, the highest in history. And the interest rate in the debt is now surpassing $1 trillion. And rates ain't going down, even though the Fed cut rates. You see where this is going? We're going to hear austerity measures coming out really soon in this country. They have no other choice. Either they're going to increase taxes on everybody in a big way to get out of this hole, or we have to do austerity. What do you think will happen to the economy if that is the case? But somehow, ladies and gentlemen, the laundromat, famous for money laundering, J.P. Morgan, calls it the U.S. economy has already made, not just predicting, has already made a soft landing. Is what I just showed you looks like a soft landing? Haven't we heard this crap before? 1999, bracing for a soft landing, and then we know what happened? Haven't we heard this before in 07, Jan 2007? Soft landing is set for the economy. Look at this, energy costs lowered. The decline in energy cost has given consumers money to spend on other items. The biggest drop in gasoline, and then what happened? It came back. It exploded higher in 2008. August 2007, Bush. Wall Street will make a soft landing from recent turbulence. Oh, really? September 07, U.S. economy on track for soft landing, says the Dallas Fed. Whoops. And here's a dose of reality, a sobering dose of reality from June 2000. Robert Samuelson, one of the best writers in the Washington Post before he retired, of course, in 2020. But he says a soft landing, ? Listen to this. Modern economics makes itself intelligible by adopting everyday analogies. If inflation worsens, we say the economy is, quote, overheating, end quote. If the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, it's, quote, applying the brakes, end quote. If it cuts rates, it is, quote, stepping on the gas, end quote. The metaphor of the moment is, quote, soft landing, end quote. The economy slows enough to avoid higher inflation, but not so much that it suffers a hard landing, quote unquote, aka a recession. It is an inciting vision which may or may not come true. The trouble with these analogies is that even if they clarify, they oversimplify. The case of a soft landing, though plausible, it never really happened. They say in the 90s it happened, but it never really happened. If you look at the data in the 90s, it wasn't really a soft landing because there was no problem. It was just rewinding, overdoing the policy and the tightening side. That's all there is. Anyways, back to the piece. The case for soft landing, though plausible, may not come true because the economy is not an airplane and Alan Greenspan, chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, is not its pilot. Bingo. We could say the same thing about the Federal Reserve chairman that we have right now. He's not a pilot. He's not in charge. He cut rates and the bond market says, screw you. Rates are going higher. So we go back to the wall of hope. And you know that this prospect of soft landing and rate cuts, that's a fugazi. That's going to be exposed in time. What about the other, perhaps more important, element of hope, which is the AI mania, elevating stock prices and keeping the wealth impact intact? We have some warning signs here because the U.S. is now increasingly slapping in more and more caps on exports for NVIDIA, AMD chips, any AI advanced chips. They're adding more and more export bans. It ain't just China. Now they're including another big buyer, Middle Eastern countries like Saudi Arabia and UAE. If the government actually cracks against the proxies for China, Russia, Saudi, UAE, and the others, including NVIDIA, by the way, buying their own chips via CoreWeave, all of these scams. If the government cracks down on all of this, you'll see this whole bubble coming down big. But right now, they can, China, you can ban the exports and then they use a proxy to buy the chips anyways. But the government wants to crack down even more now. And the question becomes, what about the candidates, though? Will Donald Trump, for example, be better in allowing chips sales to China? I don't think so. I think he wants the advantage to be to the United States, not China. And the same with the Kamala Harris administration. They've been tightening these export guidelines. And she said in the debates that she actually said Trump will be loose and sell our chips to China. She's not going to do it because, again, it's the national security issue, the way it's looked at. And we know who rules the country. It's the national security apparatus. It ain't the president. So it doesn't matter which administration you get. The export bans and restrictions will continue to increase. One of the first casualties that we know about right now is a Dutch company called ASML. Gave us the first glimpse on how U.S. chip exports curb will dent its China sales. Because you got to remember, our export bans are not just for U.S. companies, but for any ally companies, in ally countries, I should say, like the Netherlands, the UK, Korea. You can't sell chips to China, AI equipment to China. Otherwise, no more NATO. We'll let the Russians nuke you right away. Netherlands-based chip equipment maker ASML said Tuesday that it expects net sales for 25 to come in at the lower half of a range it had previously or provided previously. Roger Dasson, ASML's chief financial officer, said on a call with analysts Wednesday that the company expects China's sales to drop next year, citing U.S. export restrictions as one of the reasons. ASML's China-based customers had stockpiled less advanced ASML machines to get ahead of the U.S. exports. Now demand in the country is expected to dry up significantly. You can see here that in Q3, their sales in China went down. And with the export controls, they're going to go down further. And U.S. demand ain't going to make up for the drop in China demand. You see this phenomenon in other chip names that are relying on China. Names like Texas will be really important tomorrow as they report their earnings. Names like Qualcomm, and soon enough NVIDIA. NVIDIA, the difference between NVIDIA and ASML is they have sugar daddies here in the U.S. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Apple spending a ton of money buying chips from NVIDIA. But if you take China out of the picture, then we see these big cap technology companies slowing down spending because their margins are going to get hurt. And as their margins get hurt, their stocks will go down. The management will have to reduce spending. It all frizzles out. And if the AI mania frizzles out, the stock market goes down. The wealth impact is diminished in the economy. And that's when we see more layoffs If we see more layoffs, what happens to all the debt accumulated by the consumer in the economy? You see where this is heading, and everything is connected right now. Let's segue to the wall of worry. And here we have the policy risk, the election risk, geopolitics, China risk, the no deal, meaning no more rate cuts, which we discussed in details in the previous coverage, that if we see inflation going up, the Fed will be restricted from cutting rates anymore. And that's going to upset the market. And then we have the Bank of Japan risk. We'll talk about all of these in details. Beginning with the policy risk. Who knows who's going to win the elections in about, a couple of weeks or so? But the expectations are that both administrations will be tough when it comes to regulations against these companies. With inflation going higher, of course, you got to find a boogeyman, and they find a boogeyman in a company like Visa, which has a huge monopoly in the U.S. debit card market, and they can charge whatever they want for the merchants. Now the DOJ is suing Visa, alleging monopoly. Stock goes down, and if there's a judgment that comes out, stock will go down further. In the Democratic side, you got Lena Khan, even though Kamala promised some billionaires that she's going to get rid of Lena Khan. But if she does, it will be a big backlash, a betrayal to a huge constituency. On the other hand, in the Trump administration, you have J.D. Vance, who's also in agreement with Lena Khan that some of these companies are abusing their powers. And they have monopoly-like impact in the market, so we have to break these down to allow opportunity and free markets once again in this country. It ain't just Visa, folks. The DOJ is also taking on Google. Break up Google, ? Justice Department says it may ask judge to force Google to sell Chrome, Android, and other units. I say about time, isn't it? This company abused its power, monopolized search engines in favor of the highest bidder. You pay them more, you get a favorable outcome in the results. They restricted freedom of speech. I don't think anybody will feel bad if Google is broken down. But breaking down Google will be bad for the equities market because you have one giant being broken down, and that's going to put down the indices with it. That's going to impact your retirement accounts. And then that's going to impact the wealth effect in the economy. And there's a domino effect too. If the DOJ kills Google, it is likely the deal that Google has with Apple, where they pay $25 billion to the iMob, aka Apple. They have Chrome as the search engine in iPhones. Because you got to remember, Apple is another company that they should break down in a big way. It's a criminal company. They have no innovations anymore, and they rely on gangster-like tactics of bullying anybody for cash. If you want any business using the iPhone, we get 30% of the payment. If you want us to have your search engine on an iPhone, you got to pay $25 billion. So now all of a sudden the regulatory risk is becoming increasingly a source of worry. Not to mention, of course, now that we near the elections, what's a better boogeyman than Big Pharma? So you heard Bernie Sanders, for example, coming out with a lot of attacks against Big Pharma. And the stocks went down in response, by the way. Look at the stock of Merck and the health insurers. All of them went down recently. Even the Ozempic mania and Eli Lilly and NVO. Bernie Sanders, there's a great senator from Vermont. And he says that we pay more in this Ozempic bullshit. The Canadians don't pay more. And you know what? He's right. We have a lot of price gouging in the big pharma. If you crack down on that, you crack down on the stocks of these companies and you impact your retirement account. Not to mention, of course, when we talk about the policy risk. Drunken Miller, billionaire investor, says that the market is now very convinced that Trump will be the next president. Okay, if Trump becomes the next president, we have to prepare for tariffs against China, against Mexico, against Canada, the European Union. We go back to the tariff wars, and we have to price that in the economy. It could cause more inflation. It could cause equity prices to go down. It could cause a tit-for-tat war where China imposes more tariffs on us, or the European Union imposes more tariffs on us. And that's going to have a bad impact on the economy. We go back to the wall of worry. What about the election risk? Things changed dramatically since the last time we talked, because it was clear that Kamala Harris has the lead. A huge gap. She was the favorite to win, easy. But recently Trump made a comeback in a big way, and now he took the lead. And this is, by the way, TIPP Insights, the most accurate poll. It's not biased at all. And it's showing now that Trump took over. I think if you go back to that 60 Minutes interview, Kamala absolutely blew it. The more she talks, the more you're asking questions like, what the hell and how the hell did this happen? And can I really trust her? It takes me back for some of you kids. You go back to 09, which is ancient history, I know. But there was a viral moment where Matt Damon came out and talked about Sarah Palin, that this is a disaster and how did this happen. Where's Matt Damon right now? After the disastrous interviews that we got with Kamala Harris on 60 Minutes and yet again on Fox News. Anyhow, when you look at the same poll, are you better off now compared to your situation pre-COVID? Overall, 53% say no, 36% say yes, 11% say not sure. Among independents, 55%, the majority say no. So the economy is a big deal. The moment you talk about the economy, the Trump administration that is, that's when they shine. And recently, the Trump campaign sharpened their attacks by talking more about inflation and all of that. Because you could say, hey, I don't like Trump, he's an asshole, and I might just go with what I know and vote for Kamala. But then you're reminded with how much you pay in rent, and that leaves a sour taste in your mouth. I think the more he talks about that, the more he gains in the polls. And of course, this viral moment of the McDonald's doing the fries thingy and the memes that came after, of course, all of this is good politics because it shows him in a different side. The Kamala administration is trying to portray him as a billionaire or a threat to democracy, out of touch, and all of that. You see the guy in McDonald's having fun, and that's good politics. The involvement of Elon Musk, good politics. The involvement of The Undertaker, good politics. And by the way, Dave Bautista, I mean, this is a case when you abuse steroids and then you abuse Ozempic. That's what happens. But folks, we don't elect presidents based on feelings or polls. We elect presidents based on the Electoral College. 270 to win. So let's play a game here. This is really fun. We begin with the map from 2020 as it is. And let's begin with the easy part. Suppose Trump flips Georgia back to red, Arizona back to red. Those are the easy ones. He doesn't win. Still short, 262. Even if he wins Nevada, 268, still short, which means that all what Kamala has to do is just keep the so-called blue wall in the Midwest. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, she wins. Doesn't matter what Trump does in the Sun Belt, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. For Trump to win, he needs the Sun Belt, but he needs an additional Midwest state. Anyone would do. Wisconsin would do. Michigan would do. Certainly Pennsylvania, big one, that would do. What if he doesn't win all of these Sun Belt states? What if he loses Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia? Can he win with one Midwestern state like Pennsylvania? No. He can win with Pennsylvania alone if he carries on Georgia too. That would do the job. If he does Pennsylvania, Arizona would not be enough. Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, barely enough, 271. Now, suppose he wins Michigan but loses Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. What does he need in the Sun Belt states? Arizona would not do it alone. Nevada would not do it alone. Now you need all three of them. You need Georgia too, because Georgia alone would not do it. So you need Georgia, Nevada, Georgia, Arizona would do it. Suppose he wins Wisconsin only in the Midwestern states. Can he win alone? No. He needs Georgia, but that's not going to be enough. He needs Arizona. That'll do it. Or he needs Nevada. That's not going to do it. So you see how tight it is? You need all of them, or at least Georgia, Arizona, and Wisconsin to do it. Now, weird scenario. Let's say he wins the Midwest, inflation, whatever, demographics, but he loses the Sun Belt. That's going to do it. 279, 259. So again, the easy answer for Trump to win is winning one of these Midwestern states. Then you have a lot of options. If you lose all of them, or if you lose Pennsylvania, if you see that during election night that he's losing Pennsylvania, the odds diminishes dramatically and it goes in favor of Kamala. But again, talking about inflation is having an impact on the polls. Here's why inflation may look like it's easing, but it's still a huge problem. Again, remind folks of pre-2020, 2021, when the Biden-Harris administration took over, and right now. Food inflation up 22%, eggs up 87%, auto insurance up 47%, gasoline up 16%, and the current debt delinquency rate is 2.74%, the highest in nearly 12 years. So once you remind folks about the economics, it makes it really, really hard to vote for the current administration. And you might just swallow the pill and vote for the other side out of desperation. And as that dynamic plays out, the market, the economy has to price the different policies. And perhaps most importantly is what's going to happen to the another item here in the wall of worry, the geopolitics. Because both of them will have different approaches when it comes to Russia-Ukraine front and the Middle East front. We start with the easy one. On the Russia front, we know that Ukraine been losing and been taking a lot of risk, and they're just asking for more and more and more, and nothing is enough. You pour in more money, more weapons, it's not doing the job. Even the Telegraph, which is a wing for British lack of intelligence, they admit that Russia retakes half of the lost Kursk territory in a blow to Zelensky. Okay, now what's going to happen? I know what's going to happen if Trump is elected. He's probably going to find a settlement in the Russia-Ukraine front, and that's going to be bad for the defense contractors, because no more free cash flowing around. If Kamala wins, though, then we're probably going to see more and more escalation in the Russia-Ukraine front. And it might lead to the defense contractors being hot stocks. But what is that going to do to energy prices later on? And inflation and other really important grains and metals exports from that territory, Ukraine and Russia. On the Middle East front, because we talked before about the geopolitical risk where we can see the Middle East front and the Russia-Ukraine front colliding, and we have World War III. So right now, I think the Middle East front, taming that front, cooling off that front is the most priority. But we have different policies. Maybe Kamala is more into cooling off the situation in the Middle East. She's helpless, of course, as Biden is, because they have no control over Netanyahu in Israel. Actually, he has control over them. Now, Trump, on the other hand, will actually go with Netanyahu's agenda. He's going to go full blast against Iran, which could increase the odds for a broader war and what comes with it, from inflation in commodities prices and energy prices in specific. Last week, we got a piece of information that cooled off the rally in crude oil. And this piece of information is from the Washington Post. They say Netanyahu told the U.S. that the strike is not going to be on Iranian nuclear or oil facilities. They're going to stick with the military facilities. Whether that's going to be true or not, I don't think there is a high degree of trust between the two countries in sharing intelligence. We'll talk about that in a second. Because U.S. officials believe that Israel would target military and energy sites in Iran. So that's still on. The risk is still here. And any hit against the oil facilities, any significant hit against Iran, period, will lead to a surge in crude oil. And you get a little taste of it based on speculation alone. You get the actual hit, things will flare up significantly in the Middle East. And without a doubt, we will see higher crude oil prices. And then you go back to the inflation discussion that we just had. What would that do to the CPI? And oh, by the way, these strikes against Iran come with a warning from Russia to not even consider attacking Iranian nuclear facilities. I mean, even if they attack the military facilities in Iran, isn't Iran the one supplying weapons and rockets and drones to Russia? What would be the Russian response and involvement in that scenario, which is not far-fetched? You see how dangerous this game is? And things could escalate out of control really fast. Now, the latest piece of news that we got came out over the weekend. Listen to this. It reads, purported leaked U.S. intelligence documents appear to show Israel's plan for attack on Iran. What are they talking about? Here it is. The documents posted on social media have markings that would indicate that they originate from the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA. We have so many intelligence agencies. The alphabet soup, as they say. Anyways, this is the U.S. agency that collects, analyzes, and distributes intelligence gleaned from satellites and aerial imagery. ABC News is not quoting directly or showing the documents. Oh, gee, what a tease. What's the point of reading all this crap? Well, I looked at the documents, and my 2 cents, this is not a leak. This is intentional, because the leak shows that, hey, we got eyes on you, and we can leak this information easily. But we're not going to leak the most important and sensitive parts of the plan. So Israel, are you getting the memo? Don't do it before the elections. How desperate is this administration just to keep things patched up before the elections? Manipulation of the economic data, throwing a ton of cash on the economy to keep it alive, manipulation of the market, manipulation of the bond market, and also now trying to play with geopolitics. What happens after the elections, though? As the shit just hits the fan altogether. And speaking of, are we going to be dragged into war, a broader war in the Middle East? If you're not naive, you know that this risk is real. And I would say it's right now closer to 50%, if not even more than 50%. The Israelis can play, oh, we're going to attack now, not now, to play some politics and score some favors from the upcoming administration. And maybe they scored some. Because now, listen to this headline. U.S. is sending powerful defense system to Israel, deepening its involvement in the conflict. Keyword, deepening its involvement in the conflict. And these systems are the THAAD missile system, which has to come with hundreds of U.S. troops to operate the system on the ground. Now, suppose Israel hits Iran. Iran responds by hitting Israel in a big way. And somehow they attack some of these THAAD missile systems or attack the U.S. troops, and we see death among U.S. troops in Israel. We're on. We're now involved. There's gonna be a war for sure. Could it be a false flag? Could it be Israel doing something crazy to involve us? Oh, whoops, your troops died. And it's not us who did it, it's the Iranians, wink, wink. Now you guys gotta go to war and fight Iran on our behalf. You think that's crazy or far-fetched? Think again. I mean, go back to that speech to Congress that Netanyahu did after 9/11, and he was ordering hits all over the Middle East. Oh, you guys got to take Gaddafi, you guys got to take Saddam, you guys got to take this and that. He's ordering hits like he's ordering for McDonald's. You think he's not going to involve us into another war to take his fiercest enemy? You want a clean house, you're going to take the head of the snake, quote unquote. And that's Iran. And they cannot take Iran on their own, Israel. So they have to let the U.S. do the job for them. And this could be the link. Whoops, U.S. troops die in Israel because Iranian missiles rain down. Gotta go to war now. Anyhow, let's move on before the Mossad blows up my electric dildo. And let's talk about the other item in the wall of worry, which is China. When we talk about China, what is the risk here from China? The problem with China is good news is bad news and bad news is bad news. So bad news such as, oh, the Chinese economy will grow less than expected. What does that mean for U.S. exports, for U.S. companies that rely on the Chinese market? That's not good news. What if we have some good news from China, such as the all-in stimulus that we talked about, or cutting the benchmark lending rates by 25 basis points? The Chinese are trying to stimulate their economy. That comes with higher demand for commodities, which means higher inflation, which means that the Fed is going to be in a bad shape. That if we see some recession in the economy here, because of Chinese demand on commodities, we have inflation risk, which will restrict the ability of the Fed to rescue the economy, domestic economy. And it ties in with the last piece on the wall of worry, which is the Bank of Japan. Listen to this. Japan's headline inflation for September came in at 2.5%, while core CPI, which excludes fresh food prices, rose 2.4% year-on-year, compared to the estimate of 2.3%. So inflation in Japan higher than expected. And the problem is if China stimulates, and China causes an inflation in commodities prices, and add to that the geopolitical problems, which could add to more inflation in commodities, then inflation in Japan would become a major problem. And the BOJ will have to continue to increase rates and firm up the Japanese yen to remedy the inflation problem in Japan. As they do that, the yen goes higher at the expense of the dollar devaluing. And the dollar devaluing will add more to commodities inflation. It's going to backfire. And then what is the Fed going to do? Increase rates to lift the dollar higher? I mean, we're already seeing this problem that we talked about since last year, folks, that at some point we will see these central banks colliding. And why is the dollar surging higher as of late? Sure, the Fed made a mistake. They revived the inflation risk. But across the Atlantic, the ECB is easing the policy and devaluing the euro, which is lifting the value of the dollar higher. For now, this is a good outcome because it restricts inflation in commodities as the dollar goes higher. But it also diminishes corporate profits. Companies that are making, multinational companies based in the US, that are making business overseas. With the higher dollar, their profits go down. But the problem would be if we see the Bank of Japan raising rates and firming the yen, then dollar goes down, and that increases commodities pricing. We're heading into a really difficult period here, folks, with a lot of challenges, a lot of landmines that we could step on. We covered some of them in this program tonight, showed you the data, showed you the analysis. We're not just talking based on emotions here. We're talking based on trends, history, and data. So I hope that you enjoyed the coverage tonight because it wraps up the macro side of the coverage, but we do have the market coverage coming out for the members tonight. In it, we're going to continue the conversation from last night because the technicals were dominant in the market today. You saw the dollar doing one thing, bond yields doing one thing, and impacting certain classes of assets, the majority of stocks that are sensitive to bond yields and the dollar. And then you've seen another dynamic of NVIDIA going higher. And that kept the indices from going down dramatically. So we have technicals now dominating. We're going to dissect all of the information, look at the danger levels in the dollar and bond yields, and what to expect next. So stick around with us here, folks. But for this video, this is all I got for you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the coverage, please return the favor by pressing the like button, leaving us a nice comment in the section, and subscribing to the channel, and better yet, join us to become a member and access all of the videos. But with that, folks, once again, this is all I got for you for this video. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Appreciate and love all of you. And I'll be talking to you again soon. Take care.
I'm not afraid of the man who wants 10 nuclear weapons, Colonel. I'm terrified of the man who only wants one. Recession.